Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and these are closed-door secret briefings about vital information about Scientology and the world, information that you need to know. And today's briefing is absolutely exciting, and I'm excited. Okay, this is an exciting briefing. Okay, get ready for this one. I think this one is share-worthy. I think this one will blow your mind about the truth about Scientology and intelligence operations and stuff like that, and understanding how the world really works. Because when you master that secret groups exist out there and intelligence agencies exist, you view world events in a completely different way. So today's briefing is about Hubbard and being an intelligence officer, Hubbard and the CIA, Hubbard and naval intelligence, Hubbard and an agent of some government organization. Because remember, the government it's like the biggest thing ever. It's got so many departments, so many things. It's got like, I don't know, the US government has like 40 of its own different intelligence departments. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, that's why when you use the term government, it's kind of a handy term, because you can just cover it. It just covers so many things. You know what I mean? So today's briefing is pretty cool, and it is one of the last briefings I'm doing, and so it's exciting because it's no more kind of boring briefings. I mean, these are briefings that are just essential, straight to the point, absolutely vital information. Okay? So basically, I became aware maybe a year ago or 8 months ago that Hubbard might actually have been an intelligence agent. And I hadn't really heard the rumor before, or it never really made sense to me or anything. But I think it was when I was reading Janice Gilham Grady's book, and in it, maybe there was a story about the Apollo ship being accused of being CIA by some of the small ports they were visiting in the Mediterranean or whatever. And I was kind of like, oh yeah. So suddenly I looked at all the data that went on with Hubbard's life and Scientology, and I put on the goggles that Hubbard was an intelligence agent. And so let's see if the data makes sense. And I thought, oh, this is starting to make sense. Oh, this is interesting, right? And I was like, wow, yeah, Hubbard could have, I mean, in Ron's Journal 67, he mentions that he was trained in intelligence. I mean, why the hell was he trained in intelligence? Unless he was going to get used as an intelligence agent. Because the tactics you learn in intelligence are very shifty, very secretive. And they don't just train someone in it and then say, oh, sorry, you're not going to become an agent, you can just go and become a plumber or something like that. It's like, whoa, once they let you in on the secrets of how they operate and stuff like that, you're in. And apparently you're in for life when it comes to these intelligence agents. It's not easy to get in and out of these groups. It's like what I imagine what it'll be like to get to the highest levels of Freemasonry. It's like you've checked before they let you up to the highest levels, and then you don't just get to go out easily. They don't just tell you their secrets and then let you out. So the intelligence agencies have certain tactics and shifty things they do, like assassinations and rigging elections and all these shifty little things they do. And so they don't just train someone in it and then just let them go out. Okay, so and not be an agent. So you know what I mean? So it's just it's interesting. But anyway, he mentions it in Ron's Journal 67. But yeah, I was like, hold on a second, this is making a lot of sense, because you have to know about what was going on in the world and what was going on with the governments back in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, so I became aware he could have been an intelligence agent, and I've just been looking out for more and more data, and I personally do believe he was an intelligence agent. and I believe I found the smoking gun, and it's the Morocco incident, which Scientologists might know about. It's the incident where there was a big stuff up with the King of Morocco, and then Hubbard had to flee and go into hiding in New York, right, around 1972. Now, I never knew the full story of that, but now I pretty much know the full story of it. And to me, looking at it, it absolutely implicates Scientology as being connected with the CIA and being connected with a coup of the government, trying to assassinate the king, basically. Because you have to understand, what was the CIA doing at the time? They were taking over territory in the world, basically. And it seemed that communism was taking over territory of the world as well, and it was like a competition between the CIA in America and Russia and communism, and taking over things. But then there was, of course, the communist world government, which was pulling the strings of both the groups and stuff. But that's a whole nother level. But that was the whole United Nations stuff, the New World Order. They were happy to have America infiltrate certain things, but they weren't going to have them infiltrate traditional American freedom. They were going to eventually make it into like an American police state. So that's their goal. Anyway, so it seems that the CIA assassinated the Australian Prime Minister in 1967, I think, because he was potentially going to make Australia leave the Vietnam War. So the CIA were hell-bent on making sure that they had territory as opposed to the communists. And it seems that Hubbard was potentially working with the CIA and using Scientology as his cover in order to achieve this, right? And I'll go into the Morocco story later on. So just get ready for that, because that's really interesting. That's where I reckon there's a smoking gun, because I'm reading the book L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman, and it's got more information indicating it. And it's like the more books I read, the more I come across things where I just go, yeah, this is another little clue. This is another clue. Like, what was one of the books? I mentioned Janice Gilham Grady's. But there's another big one that I read. I think it was Russell Miller's book about L. Ron Hubbard. I can't remember what it's called. What's the Russell Miller book called about L. Ron Hubbard? Anyway, the Russell Miller book, that as well, when it goes into Hubbard's, actually I think it's quite a good biography of L. Ron Hubbard's life, if you want to get an idea of L. Ron Hubbard's life. That Russell Miller book, it doesn't say Hubbard was an agent in it. Oh, well, it mentions that he was writing, I think, Navy propaganda, or something like that. But just the information in it, to me, like I read that and I was like, oh yeah, this is actually more stuff that's indicating, because there was probably some more stories about the Apollo ship and Scientology and stuff. Anyway, so now I'm reading this other one, Madman, Messiah or Madman. And this has more information. This has what I think is a smoking gun, and I'll read it out. But let's get into this, because Scientologists have no idea who Hubbard was in his private life. They just have no idea. They don't know about the alcoholism. They don't know about the crazy behavior. They don't know that he wasn't a Scientologist. He violated his own beliefs and stuff. He really wasn't a Scientologist. He was probably a squirrel Scientologist, is probably the best way to describe him. He just did what the F he wanted, and he was shifty, and he didn't even do what he actually what he wrote down. Like, for example, he would write down you shouldn't handle people with anger and you shouldn't key them in and stuff, and whereas he would use that tactic when he was controlling the Sea Org. He would say, you shouldn't, he would say, I think alcohol's bad and stuff like that, but he was an alcoholic. He would say drugs are bad, but you shouldn't take drugs or alcohol, but he definitely was an alcoholic, and it's very likely he was into drugs. And so like, he violated the way to happiness like there's no tomorrow. He would be in ethics all the time if he was around these days. Like, it's ridiculous. The whole Scientology religion is retarded. But it's a really cool adventure, and I recommend trying it. But just remember that it's totally shifty. The whole thing is totally shifty. But Hubbard wasn't even a Scientologist, is what I'm trying to say. And then there was a guy, Otto Roos, and I'm listening to his story. I haven't got to it yet, but I'll probably mention it in the next briefing. He bloody well, like, CS'd Hubbard's case and stuff and found problems with his folders and wanted to correct it. And Hubbard basically didn't want standard tech applied to his case and, like, I think tried to punch him and then kicked him off the Apollo ship. So Hubbard was like totally just the worst PC you could ever imagine. Flagrant violations of tech. I mean, we've got David Mayo, who came across Hubbard's case in 1978 or something when Hubbard was almost going to die, and he audited him and maybe gave him some theta and helped bring him back to life. And he found all these problems with Hubbard's case. So if Hubbard's this genius, why the hell was he stuffing up all this self-auditing and like, because he's at the higher levels where you do self-auditing. Hubbard was a terrible Scientologist. Like, he was barely even a Scientologist. Like, it's crazy. Anyway, but about that, one part of the private life of L. Ron Hubbard is that you start, besides those flagrant things which people who hate Scientology love to bring up, they don't know much about intelligence ops, so they don't put attention on one part of his private life, and that was that he appeared to be an intelligence agent. That part, they have a blind spot in their mind, like people like John Attack and Chris Shelton. They have no idea about intelligence operations. It's just a part of they're tone deaf, if you know what I mean. Like when I played guitar years ago, I could never tune a guitar by ear. I just do not have that ability. I would hear the thing, dung, and then I'd be like, and I'd hear the other one, dung, and I'd be like, I couldn't tell the difference between if it was in tune or not, but my friend could just do it, and I was always pissed off that he could tell the differences between the tones. I just couldn't. I just didn't have that ability, right? And so some people, we all have different abilities, but these people, they have a blind spot in their mind for intelligence ops. They just cannot see them. They're just like, huh? I mean, I was listening to there were the Beatles songs, and there were some person had put the Beatles songs into classical music versions. So the Beatles pop songs, like, I don't know, Day Tripper to do, it was put into like a violins and orchestra, you know what I mean, like classical music, and it was like, you know, like, it's hard to explain, but the song would start playing and I'll be like trying to guess which Beatles song it was, and I'll be like, it'll take me ages, and my friend could get it like that. The one who could tune guitars. He wasn't tone deaf, and he could get the Beatles song like straight away. He'll be like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, how the hell do you know that? I couldn't hear that. It took me ages to work that out. But we all have different abilities. So anyway, so you just because you can get really jealous. It can be quite annoying when someone has this ability and you just don't have it, and you're like, that's just unfair. But it's just how it is. But some people just do not have the ability to see conspiracies. They just don't have it. You can put them in an area, you can run an intelligence op, and they will not spot it. But other people like me, and I believe L. Ron Hubbard, can spot conspiracies. And Alex Jones clearly can spot conspiracies. They can just see them, right? So these people who hate Scientology, a lot of them can't spot the conspiracy side of Hubbard. They can't spot the agent side of Hubbard. But it does appear that Hubbard was a government agent. That's what I want to say. So that when you look into his private life, you go, oh, hold on a second. This guy could have been an agent, you know. Anyway, so I'll say all my points now. And this is going to be a long video, but it's going to be really cool. It's going to be mind-blowing. It's going to change your whole opinion of Scientology. So the Jonestown Massacre, right, was not done by Jim Jones. He was a part of it, but it was a CIA operation. And they shipped these communist and socialist blacks to that place in South America, and they were doing mind control experiments on them, and and then it was about to get exposed by a senator or something like that, and then they had to just quickly kill everyone there and close the camp down. And then they blamed it all on a crazy cult leader called Jim Jones. But that was just the front of it. And it seems like Jim Jones actually fled and got away, and he didn't even die because he was an agent all along. And so that's why when you watch, so I know it's a whole different topic, but I'm saying when you look into things, you realize, oh, the CIA use covers for when they want to do something. They don't walk around in a t-shirt saying, hello everyone, I'm the CIA. Yeah, let's go do an operation in the Mediterranean Sea. Yes, we're the CIA. See, we're wearing a hat saying CIA. They don't do that. They go in as like a little cult, an unusual cult, or they go in as like, I don't know, a group of doctors or something like that, and it's all covers and it's all secret. They go in, they run a mechanic shop in the city, and they only fix one car every 4 days, but that little office provides a little base for them to operate from, and it just appears like it's a little mechanic shop. But there's other stuff going on. They might, for example, run a restaurant, and it's called a Titanic restaurant in Williamstown in Melbourne. This is where I think Melbourne has their naval intelligence run from. It's a Titanic themed restaurant. I've been there. It's very sus, the whole thing. And so it's just a restaurant that barely makes much income because it just once every 2 weeks has a night where they celebrate things and they all eat, and you can buy tickets to go to it and stuff, and it's just once every 2 weeks. And it's like, well, this is a really poor restaurant. How are they operating only once every 2 weeks? You know, and then you find out that there's like underneath the restaurant, it goes down into like a secret base and stuff, and you see apparently men in black have been seen going in and out of this Titanic restaurant. Anyway, so they use covers. Do you get what I mean? They don't say, oh, this is our naval intelligence base right here. Big sign, naval intelligence, secret operations being done here. They don't do that. They just have like a Titanic-themed restaurant, and you just, idiots who just, and I don't mean to call them idiots, but I think they're idiots, people who can't understand conspiracies. They walk around, they just go, that's just a Titanic restaurant. Oh, those conspiracy theorists saying that that's a secret government operation base. What idiots are they? Like, they're just so dumb. But anyway, you know, and one time actually when I went to this restaurant, was the only time I've actually been inside the restaurant. I remember snooping around and stuff, and then quickly one of the staff members came down and was like, oh, what's going on here? And that was, I was like, oh, that's the way how he rushed down. It was like he knew that I knew the secret or whatever about it. And he was just like, it was just so typical, you know, the way how it like, because I mean, if you go to a restaurant now and then you just walk to a certain section, no one's going to rush up like that quickly, like they're trying to cover something up. Like, what are you going to do? Open up a door and see a box of tissues or something in a room, or like bread or something in it. Like, anyway, it was just interesting when I went down to that little spot, and then he came out. It was like, he came from upstairs, and it was like he was making sure I wasn't able to suss out the place and stuff. Anyway, it was interesting. But this is what you have to understand, how these things work. So that's why people go, oh my God, Jim Jones is so evil and so blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, that's just the mainstream media fake news version of what actually went on with the Jim Jones cult. Like, there's much more to it going on. And we've got Falun Gong, which is like an anti-Chinese group, anti-Chinese government group. And they seem to be heavily funded by the CIA. And so and I don't know all the details about them, but they might be some sort of spiritual group or something. But the CIA is promoting them and stuff. And we had actually, I remember a few months ago in the Asian part of Melbourne, I remember seeing a Falun Gong group talking, and it was like they were doing some speeches or something and saying something against anti-China, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, how do these groups get strong? It's because they got backing by powerful people. It's like Black Lives Matter. That's backed by the communist world government. You know what I mean? So anyway, That's what the CIA was also sponsoring the Moonies. So the Mooney guy was like, he was just like a CIA agent basically, but he was running a religious cult. So if you look into the Moonies, the Jonestown Massacre and Falun Gong, right, you can then start going, oh, maybe Scientology was connected to some sort of government agent. Some sort of government agency. So they're hints, but look into them. The Moonies especially, look into that, because that's this full-blown religion that was like, it was really obvious they were connected to the CIA, you know, but Scientology just wasn't completely connected to it. It was like Hubbard created this cult, and then he was he was attaching these ops to the cult of Scientology, right? Anyway, I'm going to read out something from today's post, because like I made a post on Facebook about this, because it really summarized, in my opinion, this quote really summarizes the truth about Scientology. So this is what I said before I post the picture of the quote. From L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman. This bit exposes the whole truth about Scientology. Hubbard was a government agent, probably for naval intelligence and the CIA. He was using the Apollo ship and staff to do anti-communist intelligence activities, basically trying to stop communist revolutions because communism is bad and was taking over the world. At the time, communism was toppling government after government. Nowadays, most governments are communists and lefties. Back then, there were strong right-wing groups trying to stop the commies. CIA probably has always been communist infiltrated, but back then there was a part of it that was true to traditional American ideas of freedom. Hubbard was a part of this group, I think. This is actually why Scientology was such a controversial religion back then, simply because it wasn't just an innocent religion. A crazy Scientology cult is a perfect cover for an intelligence operation. This is why Scientology and Hubbard's actions seem so strange. And don't assume that I'm saying Scientology wasn't a genuine religion. It was, but Hubbard attached onto his religion government operations. Hubbard was intelligence trained. Remember, he said so in Ron's Journal 67. And from his behavior and his guardian's office, it's clear he knew how to do intelligence operations. After investigating intelligence operations for years, it's clear to me Hubbard was a typical shifty intelligence agent. They hire people like that. His life reeks of being an agent for somebody. And then here's the quote from the book. There are some missing chapters in the story of this period that are completely unknown even to many veteran Sea Org members. These missing chapters have enabled lots of myths to develop. They have to do with the ships. They have to do with what the ships were really doing as opposed to what we proclaimed to Scientologists we were doing. What we were doing was James Bond type stuff in all these different countries. Some of the missions that we undertook were real intelligence missions to the UN and to the World Federation of Mental Health, for example, as well as to almost every government of the countries we visited. We were infiltrating these groups. I mean, we were finding the people trying to assassinate a king. We were trying to settle between one tribe fighting another tribe, trying to covertly back one political candidate versus another. All kinds of political manipulations like you'd never imagine were going on, and it was all being pulled off by very few people. So you got the Sea Org, and it was just a small part that were in the Guardian's office that were actually aware of what was happening. And the rest just were into Scientology and all this sort of stuff. Or they just thought they were infiltrating that government to forward a Scientology program or something like that. But they don't realize that wasn't the real true purpose of their mission. The agents weren't told what they were really doing. Do you see what I mean? Most Sea Org members were robotic, rigidly following Scientology think. Put under pressure and duress, they would just blab everything. So there was only a very small group of us that had to do it all over a period of 10 or 12 years. We'd been out on scenes where we had to break into presidential palace grounds, con our way past guards and so on. What really caused the rock festival, which was when a bunch of lefties attacked the Hubbard ship and claimed it was a CIA ship, was typical of what got us in trouble in most ports. The fact is that we just didn't add up. The Apollo would arrive in their quiet harbour and suddenly there were 47 motorcycles and 3 different bands playing. Here we were at the same time, supposedly a business management operation. Also a shore unit was set up in their town by us that was working on a project we had contracted with the Lisbon government in an attempt by us to gain influence. So from these governments' point of view, they're like, what the hell is this crazy ship that was doing all this stuff? It's like, what the hell? Like they're saying that they're this and then they're that and there might be Scientologists. And to me, if I was a government or a military guy in one of these countries, I'll go, yeah, this ship is up to something. They could be an intelligence operation. You know what I mean? I think the people in Madeira may also have thought we were spying on them, the locals, for the government in Lisbon. Another reason for our troubles was that we wouldn't observe customs and regulations because we were so damned arrogant. LRH was creating the problem more than not. He was getting so excited. Kathy Kariatkis or I would go into some country and ally it and he would be so excited. He was like a child with this whole new playground. He just couldn't contain himself. He would want to get into everything. What LRH wanted to do would almost invariably involve some violation of an agreement we had made. Yeah, he was shifty. So that's one quote from the book. Which I think it summarized it up. It's like mainly at the start of that quote that I was reading out, that bit where it's saying like, people don't really know what the ship was up to. They were up to real intelligence missions and James Bond type stuff. Okay, and how here's I think is a really good point. We were finding the people trying to assassinate a king, because at that time communism was trying to take over countries and stuff. And assassinate kings and stuff like that in order to achieve it. We were trying to settle between one tribe fighting another tribe. So they were getting involved in political activities. So they weren't just going into these countries and trying to infiltrate them so that they get a special government grant to expand Scientology. All right? No, they were actually getting into internal political dealings in those countries. And it's like, oh, that's kind of strange. You know, what's going on there? You know, and in Melbourne, it seemed like Scientology was trying to push for doing like e-meter checks or sec checks or overt checks of political people in Melbourne. And no wonder why they got into trouble, you know. It's like it wasn't just about, because I'm sure in these countries, because Hubbard was looking for a country to infiltrate so that he could maybe become a dictator of the country, or have a country where Scientology is granted all power or whatever to do what they want, and it's like the religion of the country. You know what I mean? It seemed like they were doing that, but it wasn't just that. There was more to what Hubbard was doing with the Apollo ships and stuff. Okay? Well, the Apollo ship. Because I just corrected myself, because I know certain people, when they hear those sorts of things like incorrect spellings or little things like that, they get upset by those sorts of things, and they think that means I'm dumb. No, I'm just lazy with my language. That's why I make spelling mistakes on my Facebook posts, because I don't care, you understand? So I say Apollo ships, and I basically mean, you know, the multiple ships they had. I know that there was only one ship called the Apollo, okay? Anyway, I just thought I'd clear that up, because they look for anything to pick fault with anything I say or do. And they're just idiots. They fuss over stupid things like spellings of words. Oh, Andy, you used the wrong language, spellings of words. And when I speak in like a direct manner, and like I don't speak eloquently, they think that's an indication that person's dumb or something like that. And it's just like, what the hell? This was like when I was in high school. Some people who I think are idiots, they thought I was an idiot. I mean, they found out how smart I was and how good at grades I got, right? They were like, oh, I thought you were an idiot. And it's just like, yeah, it's because I don't fuss about, I say gooder You know what I mean? I don't fuss about unimportant shit. You understand what I mean? I'm not trying to make myself appear to be smart. Do you understand? You know, so that's why I might come across in first glance as being dumb to these people, but it's just like, I'm not dumb. I'm just not interested in saying those things, pronouncing that word correctly. You know what I mean? You fuss about unimportant shit, you know? And also, because recently I made a post or something where someone said, I put a lot of it, I made sure it was written perfectly. It was a summary of the whole Dovid situation, and Dovid stands for, what does Dovid rhyme with that's going on in the world at the moment, right? My nickname for it is Dovid, the Dovid dab, because you can't actually say it because then you get banned and stuff. So anyway, made a post about the Dovid situation, and it was I put in more time than usual and made it written quite nicely. And some person wrote an attacking comment, like one of my haters, like, you didn't write this is too well written or whatever. So they think I'm a dumbass. Like, they're the dumbasses. They're so dumb that they think that I'm dumb. They can't even recognize when someone's smart. Anyway, sorry, I obviously I must have a bit of bypass charge or something, you know, just venting a bit. So they were attaching... It wasn't just about promoting Scientology in these countries, getting special contracts for Scientology in these countries. They were doing other stuff. And I thought, when I first thought was Hubbard a CIA agent, I thought, wouldn't Scientology be a fantastic cover for a CIA operation? Wouldn't it just be a brilliant cover? You know what I mean? And you send off you just have one or two of your actual own agents, and then the rest are actual Sea Org members, and they're in there, they're going off and doing things. Right? And they don't really know the whole story of what's going on. And if they get busted, guess what happens? Oh, it was just a bunch of crazy cult members trying to infiltrate a government. You know what I mean? It's a perfect cover, you know, because you've got to use it. Not only when you're doing an intelligence operation, you don't just use a fake identity. You also have a whole fake story if you get busted. Do you see what I mean? So you've got two layers of protection. So you go in there and you say, you know, oh, we're teachers at this, we're government cleaners, and we're working in this building, and we're cleaning, and we're going in there at night time and we're cleaning, but they're really getting data from the files, right? But we're cleaners. Oh, that's our cover, we're cleaners. Then they get busted. What's the cover if you get busted? Oh, we're just doing it to promote our religion, and we're just actually secret cult members and stuff, and it was just, and that's their cover. Do you see what I mean? So if these people got busted, the people would investigate it, and they go, oh, you're a bloody Scientologist, and blah, 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 and you don't really know there was actually the CIA behind that. Do you see what I mean? This is how intelligence ops works. You have backups after backups. You know what I mean? So that you don't get caught. You don't find out who was the real group that was causing this. You know? It's kind of like if you want to get someone murdered, you don't walk up to a criminal, because this is what criminals get used for and stuff. And this is what crazy people get used for. They get used to do assassinations. Because John Attack mentioned, here's a Scientology hater who I interviewed. He thinks that the CIA wouldn't hire criminals, and it's like, yeah, they do. They absolutely hire criminals and crazy people to get stuff done. It's just you hire whoever can get the job done. You know what I mean? That's like, and so he seems to think that a CIA agent is all these professional, smooth-talking James Bond characters. And yeah, some of them are, but some of them are just like some crazy mafia dude that they just hired to get something done. You see what I mean? So, you know, you want to get someone murdered, you go find some fucking crazy criminal or whatever, and you offer him money to go do it. But if you go and talk to the criminal, guess what? If he gets busted, he might implicate you. So what do? You go find a crazy criminal. The crazy criminal goes and talks to another crazy criminal who then does the murder. Do you see what I mean? So then you don't get busted. It doesn't get linked to you. Do you see what I mean? So this is how intelligence ops works. This is how shifty the world is, you know. Anyway, so it wasn't just about promoting Scientology. They were doing other stuff, and that's what that quote was saying. Now, So LRH also, this is an interesting fact, LRH had a secretary, oh actually that's a bit retarded, LRH had a secretary that was not a Sea Org member, and this was just a person that was paid to be his secretary. And I think that's kind of strange. It was like one of the only people around close to Hubbard and stuff that I've heard of that wasn't, volunteering and stuff, and it was actually paid. It's strange. We've also got, that's an indication that could be some sort of government agent or whatever, from an intelligence agency, from naval intelligence or whatever, that was trained to and hired to be there with Hubbard, and paid by them or whatever. We've got Scientology's connections to the remote viewing program with Ingo Swann and stuff, and that was like a CIA psychic program and stuff like that, and Scientology was connected to that, and Scientology helped start, and Hubbard literally helped start the whole remote viewing phenomenon, because Ingo Swann took some ideas that he learned in Scientology and stuff, and then developed his own tech that was much more professional and workable and stuff. But Scientology, there's a connection there between Scientology and the CIA, so that's interesting. Like I said before, LRH was intelligence trained, and he said so in Ron's Journal 67, so that means something. LRH was friends with a sci-fi writer, I think, who was called Robert Heinlein, or one of them, or multiple, actually. It's probably multiple. But these sci-fi writers were writing Navy propaganda. And one of them I'm thinking of was an intelligence agent. And like it was more well known that he was. And so it's like, well, he was friends with an intelligence agent. That's interesting. He himself, Hubbard, was a fiction writer. Maybe he was writing Navy propaganda. And then you find on later on that he was writing Navy propaganda. And that's mentioned in I think Russell Miller's book as part of Hubbard's history. When he first got involved with the Navy or something, he was writing some sort of Navy propaganda, and he's good at writing propaganda and twisting the truth and promoting things and stuff with his sales talk. So he is good at propaganda. So he was probably possibly taught by the Navy how to do that. So that's an indication that he was involved with some sort of government intelligence agent. LRH was friends with Errol Flynn, and Errol Flynn was actually secretly an intelligence agent. And he was going around filming things and stuff, like movies, but secretly they were actually filming locations for intelligence ops and stuff. And look at what L. Ron Hubbard was doing. He was going around with a camera snapping photos and stuff of certain locations. In fact, he had one camera that you point it this way and then it would snap to the side. So you could go in an area and set it up and take a photo of something, and it looked like you were taking a photo of like a tree, but you secretly were taking a photo of something onto the side of you. And L. Ron Hubbard had a camera like that, and L. Ron Hubbard was going around snapping photos. So he was possibly doing data collection on the places in the Mediterranean he was visiting on his ship. So it's just, there's so much evidence now that I lay it all down now. It's just like, it's very likely he was. So why would L. Ron Hubbard be friends with Errol Flynn, who was an intelligence agent? It just, if someone's hanging out with someone who's an intelligence agent, that to me makes it more likely that they are an intelligence agent themselves. We had the whole L. Ron Hubbard and the Jack Parsons event, and that to me, looking at it, it's possible that L. Ron Hubbard went in there to screw up Jack Parsons' life and steal his money and just stuff him up. And I believe someone later on, some other intelligence agent, went in there and blew him up, and that's how Jack Parsons died. Because Jack Parsons was actually secretly a communist. Well, yeah, was secretly a communist, but you can just look into his history. I've read a book about it, and it's kind of like Hubbard. There's clues that this dude is there's something going on. In fact, there's much more clues that he was a communist than that Hubbard was actually an intelligence agent. It's just quite clear that Jack Parsons was a communist and he was friends with communists, and I think he sold data about planes or whatever science he was doing to maybe the Israelis or something like that. But it to me, I believe that Jack Parsons was shifty. He was a rocket scientist or whatever, but he was selling data to someone else and possibly was some sort of communist agent. And then eventually the government killed him for doing so. And I believe that Hubbard was sent in prior to that to disrupt Jack Parsons' life and possibly do data collection on him or something like that. But that whole Jack Parsons event in 1946 or something, that to me indicates that Hubbard was an agent and was doing an operation in that event. L. Ron Hubbard was a follower of Aleister Crowley, the world's most wickedest man or whatever, and Crowley was secretly an intelligence agent, and he was possibly using his religion to collect data on the parishioners, the people who follow his religion. Because it's, you can, in these cults, like Freemasonry and other ones, you can collect data on people because you ask private stuff about their life in order for them to advance to higher levels and stuff like that. So whenever you come across cults, like the intelligence agents are right up there. Like when it comes to Freemasonry, like to get into an intelligence agency, you sort of already have to be like a Freemason and stuff like that. So it's very, they're very closely connected. And we've got Jeffrey Augustine, who's a well-known Scientology hater, you could call him. He's a Freemason, and he also is a private investigator, which to me means intelligence agent. And his wife, Karen de la Carrière, has apparently, she had like a LinkedIn page, and it said all the government connections she had and stuff like that, and she is totally an agent, he's totally an agent, and to me, it's just, it appears as if, I personally think that they are there in the anti-Scientology movement to make sure that the anti-Scientology movement is always an anti-Hubbard movement and never an anti-government movement, and never is aware of the government connection of Scientology and the government connection that Scientology has, the connection that Scientology has to the government. They're like there to make sure that people aren't aware of that. So it's like even when you leave Scientology and you join the cult of people or the group of people who don't like Scientology, you're still getting misled by the government and getting screwed over. But yeah, you see, you look into it and you see there's a connection between these cults and Freemasons and intelligence agents and stuff. So if Hubbard admired Crowley and Crowley was an agent, Hubbard could have thought, oh, well, I'm going to copy off Crowley and stuff like that and start my own religion and use that to do intelligence ops or whatever. The Guardian's office hired former intelligence agents, and that to me is a little bit of a connection as well, more evidence. Weak evidence, but when you connect all these bits, all these points, you look at all these things, and that's what I'm doing. I'm laying down all this information to you like it's a court case. I'm saying, look, this, guilty, Your Honour, and at the end of this video, I don't think we can say 100%, but I think we can say, gosh, it's likely. It's quite likely. You know what I mean? And I'm happy now. I believe I've come to a conclusion. I think I've seen enough information to say, yeah, he was involved with the government. It's quite clear, actually. So anyway, yeah, the Guardian's office hired former intelligence agents and stuff. That to me is like, oh, really? Like, what if they're no longer former intelligence agents and that's just what they say? I mean, do you know what? All right, the camera stuffed up. But this briefing is going to have to go into a part 2, and I think part 2 is probably better than part 1 because there's so much to say on this connection between L. Ron Hubbard and being an intelligence agent. So, yeah, have a listen to part 2. See ya.